Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product here at Alpha Software. And today I'm going to be giving you a presentation on Alpha Anywhere, but I'm also here to answer your questions. And you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Before I begin, I just want to make sure that my audio is coming through and that you could see my screen. So if someone could quickly just type in the questions box, whether or not you can see me and whether or not you can. Wonderful. Thanks so much. Great. So today what I wanted to get started with is actually looking back at what we did last week on the form view control. So I'm going to back up here a few slides. And so last week we talked about the form view control. The form view control is a control that you could place on a UX in your mobile and web applications that allow you to display fields, often coming from a list control, in a way that is easier for you as the designer to lay out, that loads faster for the end user because it requires less HTML and JavaScript to be loaded, and also is highly customizable. So I showed you basically all three of those things last week, and I explained sort of how to put them together. But what we didn't really talk about is this last bullet point here, allows highly customized UI and UX interfaces. We did show us a few videos of it though last week, and the videos that can all be found in our Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A playlist, which is available on YouTube. So last week's videos would have gone over this. But the question that we want to get into is, how do we make these form view controls look good? And the answer is we use a technology that's called client-side templating. Now, client-side templating is used in a few other controls. We'll get that into in a minute, but I'd like to explain quickly how that works. So what we're looking at right now is a client-side template. At its most simplistic, and this isn't a simple example, but at its most simplistic, it really requires only two elements that go into the tester. One is the data, and this is often sample data when you're building the template because it'll be replaced by your real data later on. And that data is entered in JSON format. And there are ways that you can pull that from a SQL Server database to have it entered in like that for you automatically. We also have sample data and things like that that you can use too for the JSON data. And I will be doing a demo of that in a few minutes. So the data is one part. The second part is the template. The template is basically a collection of HTML tags and commands, but it also includes these things called, commands basically. And commands are things that are replaced and fields that are replaced when the template is rendered. So what you end up with is, by taking this kind of data and that kind of template, Alpha Anywhere squishes them together and it creates a nice formatted output like we have here. So here you can see we've had hierarchical data. And so we've had for each customer, we've listed out what their orders were. We knew ahead of time what they came to, what dates they took place on, and all of that. And those are all sort of calculation bits that you can do. But this is how you laid it out. We put in, there was some CSS and stuff that went behind this as well. So like I said, the basic behind any JSON templating is just the data and the template. But there are two other things that you can add that'll make it more powerful. One is CSS, of which we used quite a bit of it here, just to give things like shading behind the table and font sizes and families and colors and spacing, and all of those things were handled using CSS. And JavaScript, which allowed us to perform some calculations. Now, all of this takes place client side. And so let's go take a look at our next slide to see why in the world would we want to build something like this, when after all, Alpha Anywhere has got some pretty good tools for building invoices and stuff. In fact, many of you have probably used Alpha Anywhere's report writer, which using a visual drag and drop system allows you to create interfaces like we have over here on the right. So why would you do it using all of this coding? And the answer is because you can run it client side this way. This has two big advantages. Advantage one is it'll work offline. So if your application is required to work where there's no Wi-Fi or cell signal connection, and you still want to create output like that on the user's device, you're going to have to do something client-side, and that's where client-side templating is great. The other really nice thing about it is that it does not have to make a callback to your server, and that saves you money and processing time. So if you had 1,000 users trying to run 1,000 reports simultaneously on your server, that would take a significant amount of processing power compared to 1,000 users running it client side, which would take 0 processing power. So it's something to think about when you're designing your apps, is try to hit the server as less often as you can, because it means that your app will scale much more easily, because everyone who shows up with their device is actually helping you scale your app because you're actually doing the work on their device. So it's a really quite clever system. It's been in alpha probably for about 8 or 9 years now. And it is used in the form view control, but it's also used in 2 other places as well. You can use it in the list control. So if you've ever done a free-form style list control where you placed fields, you are using client-side templating to do that. And it can also work in a Viewbox control. So a Viewbox control is one that we haven't mentioned before, but you can think about it as a form view control that doesn't have the editors or the editor sets associated with them. So it's really meant purely for viewing. I know form view's got the word in it, but Viewbox really isn't meant for editing data. It's a very lightweight control, and it's a nice control to work with. But you don't have to take my word for it, because I am going to show you. So let's go ahead and pop over into Alpha Anywhere. And go over to my other machine. And here we go. So right now, what you are looking at is a UX control. We've covered UXs before, and I have a couple of Viewbox controls in there. And in fact, I'm going to hide this one so that we don't see it. So I'm going to save that, and let me just take a quick look and work in preview. I just want to make sure that I'm working with a blank slate, that everything's hidden. Yep, it is. Great. So I'm going to go back into design. Whoop, if I click the button, and I'm going to say add a control, and what I'm going to choose is a Viewbox control. Viewbox 3 is fine. So I'm going to build a simple Viewbox control, and then we're going to start. I'm going to show you one that we've added some stuff to, and then we'll get to a more sophisticated view. And in each case, hopefully, you'll be learning a little bit more about client-side templating. So I'm going to pop over here, Viewbox 3, just by double-clicking on it. And a Viewbox control really begins by defining the data. If it doesn't know what the data is, then it won't know what fields it needs to be able to lay out in the Viewbox layout. So sometimes what you'll do is just put in sample data, knowing that it'll be replaced later on during runtime. For this example, we're just going to use some static data. The other thing to know about a Viewbox is that there's kind of 2 different types of Viewboxes. There's one which is just basically HTML, but the one that we're really interested in is the data-driven one. That's the kind where the HTML and the data are merged together into a template. So a Viewbox could be used as a very simple HTML control. In fact, there's also an HTML control right here under controls, but here we're going to start out with data. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Okay, now it's asking us for a data source type. A list layout is probably the most common when you're building applications. It's what we've defaulted to here. But we're going to use, because this is just a simple example, static JSON. So we're going to have some JSON that we've already filled in ahead of time when we're building our application. So I'm going to click here to define the static JSON. And then I've got some options here. I can paste in some data in JSON format. I could paste in some data using carriage return line feed format if I wanted to. But in this case, I'm going to make it even easier. I'm going to use the sample data that's provided. So I'm going to click sample data. And I've got 4 different sets of sample data. And the one that I just started using a few days ago because I thought it was fun is the geographic data. So I'm going to choose that. So let's see if this looks easier to read in carriage return line feed format. Not really. Let's go back to JSON. All right. So you'll see that this is a JSON array. If you're familiar with JSON, and JSON format, a JSON array starts with a square bracket, and then each of the elements of the array are contained in curly braces with name valued pairs separated by commas with no comma on the last item in the list. I point that one out because people have added that and it breaks. It's such a common mistake. I always have to point that out. Anyway, so here's our array of data. Okay, so there it is. It's great. I've inserted it. It's the name, a city, a state, a latitude, and a longitude. Okay. Now, if I went and took a look at the fields, you'll see that it's already figured out for my data what my different fields are. And here they are. So in order to see this data, I could just go into the Viewbox Layout, and I have two choices here, but I'm going to use the freeform editor because today we're interested in learning out how to do client-side templating manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert a field, and I can do that just down here saying insert field, and we'll choose name. Okay. Now you'll see what it did for us is it just simply put name in curly braces. That is the field syntax that you need when you are displaying something in a client-side template. So I'm going to go ahead and click preview, and what you're going to see is going to be a big mess, and I'll show you why. Okay, so yes, it's gotten all of the names in our data, but they're all squished together because we literally have control over everything here in the Viewbox layout, including the carriage returns, line feeds, and things like that. So because a Viewbox layout is really HTML with some of these fancy things that we call commands and fields that we put in curly braces, I can add some HTML. So I'm going to say BR, not even going to put that forward space. And I'm going to say preview. And there we go. Everything is now nicely placed on its own separate lines. Okay, so let me go back to the Viewbox layout. And so that was it, kind of interesting, but not that exciting. And it's certainly not something you couldn't do with the other controls in the UX. So let's start going into showing you some of the reasons that make the UX a little bit special. First of all, let's start adding a few more fields. So I'm going to put in the city field, which is called city. And I'm going to put in a comma and a space, and I'm going to insert the state field. Nope. Click the right thing this time. Insert the field for state. All right. And I'm not going to bother with latitude or longitude, but I will talk about them in a moment because there's something cool you can do with those. All right, so I'm going to put a break here. In fact, I'm going to do two breaks. Sorry, I'm used to using that / syntax from XML, but I'm not going to do it here. All right. It works either way. Let's preview it. And there we go. It's now nicely divided up here. Cool. Now I've noticed though, I don't love the formatting because first of all, everything is in uppercase. So one of the very cool things about the Viewbox is that it has something called format directives. So let's say I wanted this to be upper and lowercase for say the city name. I could go into insert and I could choose something called a format directive. And because it's text, I'm going to use a text format directive. And then the thing, whoops, let's get really close to the bottom of the screen. Hopefully you can still see it, is I'm going to use something called title case. And you'll see the actual format for that is simply title case. So to show you how that works, so the title, every first letter is typically capitalized. So that's how it should be here. So here we go. Calabasas, Santa Monica, San Andreas, and so forth. Terrific. Let's go back into the Viewbox layout. And now this time we can leave state uppercase, but this time we'll do that one in title case as well. All right, that's easy. So a format directive, okay, that is pretty cool. But now let's do something else that you can do with your commands, because as you saw down here, when I was inserting stuff, I was able to insert a field, and in a moment ago, I inserted a format directive. But there's another thing that you can add called a command. So if you go into insert and you choose command, These are the commands that are available to you. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to pop over to our documentation system real quick and take a look at our client-side templating documentation and show you how you find out more about that syntax. So I just went into, I just did a search on client-side templating. Okay. And the first choice is client-side templating syntax. And here are some examples, not examples, here's the full list, I should say, of the things that you can use. Now, the one that you've seen already, the directive one you've seen, but most of these you haven't seen actually, so these are brand new. And let me show you how they work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try an if statement. So let's say if. And so an if statement, I need to put in an expression here to see whether or not it evaluates to true. So I'm going to insert a field, and that field is going to be state. Only I'm already in curly braces, so I don't need those curly braces again. So state. And remember, this is JavaScript syntax. So equals equals, and let's say California. And then we'll have it do something if it equals California. I could say caution, California. I don't know, maybe it's dangerous. And then we can end that if statement, insert command. And let's get down to end if. Yes, when you're good, you just memorize these and you type them in yourself, but this is always here to help you out as a backup. So now let's take a look and see what happened. Okay, caution, California, caution, California, caution. Oops, that looks weird. I think I put it in a weird place. Let's go back to the Viewbox layout and see where I put that. Oh, I want to put a break. I want to put my breaks here. All right. So it'll print the name, the city and the state. Then it'll put one break below it, and it'll insert California. Let's always do 2 breaks. Let's preview that. All right. Caution, California. Caution, California. Let's go to one that isn't in California. Okay. Doesn't have anything there. Now, let's just make this a little bit more interesting. Imagine that caution was because there's a fire danger in California or something weird like that. Let's go over to the Viewbox layout, and instead of saying caution California, let's make it more interesting. Let's put in an icon of a fire truck. So I can do that here by saying insert, and then I can choose an image. And we happen to have a bunch of icons built in that you can choose. So I'm going to select, I think there's one for a fire truck. Fire truck, or let's just do the thermometer one. That one's cool. Okay. Oops. Okay, so that was the, oops, I meant to paste that in. Insert, image, SVG, select, fire. Fire. Okay, so it's selected it for me. I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to copy it with Control C. Click OK. And I'm going to paste that in. Paste that. Oh, that's weird. I had that working just a moment ago. All right, hang on while I look at the syntax for my other Viewbox control. Sorry about that. Layout. Okay, I'm just going to cheat and steal that there. I'm not sure why I didn't insert properly, but it didn't. Cancel. Yep. And we'll put that there. All right, and this will be our last attempt at this one because we do need to move on. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hit preview. And sure enough, if it's got California in it, it's got a little fire truck underneath. So that's just one kind of clever way of organizing your data. Now, one other thing you can do is you keep in mind, you've laid this out once, but it gets repeated over and over again. Basically, it's going through your JSON array as you go. And as it's doing that, it basically prints everything that's on one line. But it is possible to create what we call scope. In other words, in much the same way that you may have parent-child types of data in which you might want to get totals for a particular invoice or for a particular customer or something like that, if that's how you have it set up. You could do the same thing on just some flat data by telling Alpha that you are interested in basically turning it into like a fake array using a command called root. And I'm going to do that right here. So if I insert this command called root, and then I insert root at the bottom to close it, insert command called root. It now knows that I can do things like put a footer into my design, which I'm going to do right now. Insert command footer. And we're going to insert command footer. And now I can add headers and footers. So this should only display once. This is a footer. I should display once at the end. Let's preview it. Blah, 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 blah. We get down to the bottom. This is the footer. I should display it once at the end. Okay, not that exciting. I agree with you. But what you can do with footers is something a little bit more powerful and do things like add totals and stuff like that. And to do that, I'm going to show you a different example. So let me just close out of there. I'm going to go back here to Viewbox 2. Now, Viewbox 2 I made just today, just before the presentation. We just open it up. And we're going to go into the layout. And this time, you'll notice the data is actually the same. It's name, city, state, longitude, latitude. And it's the same data source. As it turns out, this data is actually a collection of regional airports. So in my Viewbox layout, I gave it a title here called airports, or right above, just to give it a little bit of formatting. And then below that, I used some text directives like we did before to put the name and city and stuff in title case. But I also used an interesting directive here, sorry, command, I guess you'd call it, called count one based. What this does is it returns the row that you're on in your JSON data. But because JSON data usually starts numbering at 0, and often people want to see lists that start at 1, we have a command that'll let you do that. So if you go into insert command, you will find count one based. So I'll click OK on that. And so what happens when I run this, I'm just going to go ahead and run it, is that you'll see, I still have the fire truck, but you'll see next to each one of these, I have now numbered these. That may be useful for you, may not be. But it's just something you can do. You'll also notice at the very end, I have a footer, but this footer does something cool. It adds up all of the records and it just gives you the answer, which is 42, as we all know. All right, so let's go over to the Viewbox control, the Viewbox layout, and see how I came up with that. And the way I came up with that was by inserting not a command, but an actual JavaScript function. So in the footer, I have it call a JavaScript function that I defined called count airports. And count airports returns the number that I'm looking for. In fact, it might be more clear if I typed right in front of it, total number of airports. There we go. So what is inside this JavaScript command? I'm not a big JavaScript person, but this one is not that hard. So this function called count airports, when it's called from a Viewbox layout, is handed something called data and context. And the data is the data in the data basically from your data source. Context is where it is. So for example, if you had your JSON data set up so that it was customers, then and then within each customer you had orders, and then when each order you had items that were in that order, you could have 3 different contexts. You could have one for the customer, you could have one for the orders, and you could have one for the order items. That's what's passed in here, just so you know. You could do a different one too. You could say, I'm not interested in the current context, I'm going to put in a specific one, but that's what you get back. And then basically all this does is it returns the length of the array. That's all you do from this. So it's just going to return the length of the array in the data. So nothing special, but that's how you do it. All right. So we'll do count total number of airports, and let's go ahead and preview that. And we see total number of airports is 42 because at the very end it called our JavaScript for us. All right. So we have gone through some of the basics here in terms of the commands. As you know, you can put in any HTML you want into your Viewbox layout, but you can also add some of these special commands. You can insert some fields, and you can insert some items. I'm not going to get into items right now. Well, I will just for a second, but basically items let you do things like create clickable buttons or basically let you click buttons in a Viewbox builder. They can have on-click events associated with them that go and perform a certain action. It's not something I'm going to show you how to do today, but we do have some pre-made examples that you can get to, and I'm going to show you how to get to those pre-made examples in just a bit. All right, so okay, that's enough. So now let's go back, actually without saving, yes. And let's go take a look at Viewbox 1. Now this is the one that I showed you at the very beginning in our slideshow, and it's the one that calculates an invoice. Just double click on it to open it up. In this case, the data that we use, this static data in particular, was has arrays in it, as you can see. So there's a customer ID and a customer name, but then for each of those, each one can have multiple orders, and each order can have multiple order items. So basically, it's a parent-child-grandchild relationship. If I were to show that to you actually in the JSON itself, you'll see it's that opens one array, that square bracket, that opens another square bracket, and that opens another array. So you have the customer level, the orders level, and the order ID level. And Viewbox controls are perfectly capable of handling this type of data. So I'm going to go this type of relational data. So this is how this one was put together. I'm not going to show you everything, but it's a really good exercise if you want to take a look at it. I'll show you where to find this example. But you'll see right up here at the beginning, they have actually quite a few. What they've done is they've put in the data, which you've seen. They've put in some CSS to basically format what the HTML is going to look like on the way out. Okay. And they've built some JavaScript functions that do some processing in them. Some of the processing that it does is simply determining how many things were in the array, which I showed you how to do. But it also does things like average price and average quantity, extended price, which is price times quantity. And then here's the example of that data.length thing that gives you back the total number, the item count. So those are all in there. And if you go back into the Viewbox layout, this is it. It's not a ton of HTML, like 50 lines of HTML, but what you get out the other side is actually pretty nicely formatted. So as I clicked here, this is what you get. So you'll see that it has this at the very top. This is where the customer is. The next are the orders. And then below that are the order items. And within each one of these, we're able to do calculations. So this is a really nice example to look at if you want to put together a layout that does do calculations. All right, so let's see what we've gone over. We've talked about what client-side templating is. It merges data and a style template to form a display. It also has the ability to introduce JavaScript into that to perform calculations right in the layout when it's running, as well as CSS to style the output. The reason you would use the Viewbox control is, well, it works offline. That's one big thing. Second big thing is that it gives you the ability to work without having to hit the server. So obviously offline is one part of that, but the other part of that is just saving on server costs. So it basically people can run as many reports as they want on their phone or on their web, and it doesn't cost you anything, which is great. So let's take a look and show you where we can find more examples and some of the documentation. And before that, we're going to go take a look at one other tool that's really handy when putting these templates together. So it's one thing to start working here, here, and here with the hopping between the Viewbox layout and CSS and JavaScript and doing a preview. There's a much easier way to put these view boxes together. So let me go ahead and exit without saving. Yeah, that looks good. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to close this component. Sure, we'll save it. Why not? All right, and we are going to go take a look at in the Tools menu. When you're on the Web Projects control panel, you'll find something called the Template Tester, which is called Open Template Tester window right there. All right, kind of a buzz in my audio. Oh well, fix that. Okay, so this is the template tester window. When you open it up, it doesn't really show you, well, anything because there is no template. It just simply has data. If I were to do something simple like this, like insert that SSN field, there you can see right here in preview, that's what I get. And if I were to do something like create a style for it, like we'll call this SSN style. And it was, say, font size 24, font color, let's make it gray-ish, and font weight, let's do bold. All right, then I can go into my template and simply say span class equals, what do I call that? SSN style. I'm sure I didn't call it SSN style. Hang on a second. What did I call it? Dot SSN style. Oh, yeah, too many S's. That'll do it. That should be fine. All right, I don't know how I messed that up. But no matter, because what we're going to do is we are going to load an example. So I'm going to load an example here. Say simple object, simple template. This doesn't have any, this is just the simplest of all. So you can see there's actually quite a few here that'll show you things. So this is the one where I was talking about the parent and the root directives. Let's see if we have an example here. Yep. Again, we're not really getting into much CSS and stuff. So let me load an example that I saved before, because that sample invoice one is a good one. Here we go here. So as you can see, we've got, not sure what I did wrong with the CSS. I'm sure I'll figure it out as soon as I get off there. But here we've got the CSS that's used to define here, the JavaScript that's used to perform the calculations, the template, which defines the layout, and the JSON data, of course, that controls the values that go in here. So really, as soon as you make any kind of change in here, like let's see, I think this is probably a heading 1. So let's make a change. Let's say font size 60. Let's make it font size, ooh, let's make it 100. Let's make it huge. 100. You can instantly see the changes. And so that you can see this is a very quick way of working, because anytime you make a change here, basically as you type, you're going to see what the answer is here on the other side. So I highly recommend using the template tester if you're going to be building out client-side templates for any of the controls. So that's the client-side tester. Again, one cool thing you can do when you load examples is take a look through here, because there's a whole bunch here. And some of these are referenced in our documentation as well. And I'm going to dive back into that documentation in just a moment. All right. So let's, okay, that's pretty good. Let's see what else I've got for you. Template tester. Let's take a look at the documentation again. Okay. So there are a couple of interesting pages here. Client-side templates, which you can find here, has got an overview, and this is a very good overview. It takes you really through everything. You know, how to build the arrays that go in, how they get combined with a template, and then finally the client-side syntax. One other interesting thing is the ability to handle missing data. Sometimes you'll want to let someone know that something isn't there. For example, let's say the city field was blank. When you put in a city field, for example, you can add this directive. Instead of just city, you can do a double pipe and say not available. So if city is blank, this is the one you get back instead. And that can be combined with formatting directives as well if you want to. So, you know, you can put in however you want to do that. Let me see another one. Talks a little bit about arrays. Here's some examples here. Here are the ifs, which I showed you earlier. I showed you one of the directives for text, of which there are only a few, but there are actually quite a few for both dates and for numbers. So those are worth looking into. Especially with dates, we can do all kinds of things like friendly dates, for example, in 1 hour or tomorrow. We can do dates that are month, day, year. Really displayed in any way you want. And there's a builder built in for that. Actually, there's one other thing I kind of want to show you real quick. So you see underneath here, each one of these has got its own menu. Do use these. These are very, very simple. So this is, that doesn't really add very much value to it, but this will help fix your JSON on the way in. The template allows you to install the format directives and the template commands that I showed you before. Oh, it looks like you can go directly into help as well. Never tried it. All right. So back to documentation. I think that's pretty much what I want to cover. So I was kind of, as I have been the last few days, flying solo, so I haven't been looking at the questions. Let me just take a look at the questions real quick. Someone said, oh, okay. Can you, let's take a look. So how to use a JavaScript function in client-side templating. I think I just showed that. All you do is you build the client-side function in, I'll just show it again because it's easy. And let's do it right in a component as opposed to the template tester. So let me close this. So use templating. Grab this one, for example. So you define your function here using that. And then in the Viewbox layout, all you have to do is just put the @ sign in front of your function, in curly braces, of course, and it'll execute that function. Okay. Can a list and a UX control be filtered on the client side using a date range similar to the date range selector, which requires an AJAX callback? That is a good question. I believe that you can do that. It's escaping my head right now exactly how you do that. But I know that you can do additional filters after the fact client side. I think you can do it. Well, let's take a look. Let me just pop a list up here real quick. Okay, and throw a list control on here. That's fine. And now I'm going to add, in fact, I didn't even have to do that. I just have to add a button. So add a button. And let's take a look at Action JavaScript because we might be able to handle it that way. Filter. Okay, so I've added a button to my UX control, and now I've decided that I want to define what that button is going to do, and I'm going to use action JavaScript. If I recall, there were a bunch of list actions, filter records in a list, highly customized. I'm not sure if that's server side, though. You want to do it client side. There's list control actions, multiple actions. Let's see what they are in terms of multiple actions. Let's click on that. Yeah, there is right here, filter list client side. So that's how you can do that. Filtering lists so no AJAX callback is made. I'm going to insert that here, choose list ID, this. My search field, I don't have one. Let's pretend one of my view boxes was one. And that's it. And if we were to view that as JavaScript, this is how you do it. It's the list object is called filter list client side, and then it's simply search for. I guess that's the field that you look. There might be more options there as well, but that's where I would take a look first. But if you do get stuck, go ahead, send us an email. In fact, just a quick reminder, always send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. All right, so someone would like us to paste the documentation link from today. Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to send you 2 documentation links that I found helpful. Let's pop into Safari. Client-side templating syntax is the first one, but that's just the syntax and doesn't go through all those cool examples. So I'm going to show you that one next. So that's copy. I'm going to place this into the chat window. And so if you were going by if you're finding it from the tree, it's reference client API, client-side templates. So that's the first one. I've pasted that one in there. But the other one I want is client side templating or template. And I want the overview search. Inside, I think I need to do templating. Okay, this is the one that you really want to dive into. It's got all kinds of great examples and stuff. So let me copy that one out. Okay, I've pasted that one into the chat window. And the other thing that's interesting, and this I did promise to show you this before and I forgot, but if you take a look under HTML templates, it shows you how you can use some of the ones that are pre-built. I think these are for the Viewbox control. You say insert predefined templates. They're just kind of interesting. Here's some screenshots of them. So I don't actually probably have to show you, but you can find them right in the software. Let's find where you find them in the software though. So let's go back into my computer here. Let's pop this open. And I think, did you do it here? Load sample Viewbox. No, but here's what we can do. We're going to cancel out. Let me show you 2 things, I guess. Cancel. Actually, yes. Let me build a new Viewbox real quick. Okay, add control, Viewbox. Viewbox is one word, which is why I'm not finding it. All right. Okay. Load sample Viewboxes. So there are actually quite a few of these, which are pretty cool. One I kind of liked, and it says it's the iOS style. It still is. It's a little bit older, but this iOS login screen is kind of cool. And this does make it take advantage of buttons here and here. The layout is kind of interesting too. They've built a numeric keyboard. And then, of course, they've added a fair amount of classes, well, not too much CSS to it, basically to make the buttons round and stuff. So let's hit preview. And there you go. There's an example of a Viewbox. Wrong. The code entered is 1563. Clearly, there's a script behind it. This is a fun one to take a look at. So that's how you find that, except without say, actually, yes. Let's pop back into the view box. And I know for Viewbox layouts, there are often some samples here. The layouts, sample layouts. Okay. From library, I don't think I have any in the library. Oh yeah, I do. There are some in the library. Okay, cool. So that's how you do it. You choose it from the library. Load layout template from library is the way to get here. Click here, and we're going to choose this. This one's kind of interesting. I think this one's got two sides too. So I'm going to click that, or it pretends to have two sides. Click OK. And let's preview that. Weird. All right, let's get back in here. What is going on? Did I define the items already? Oh, I didn't define the items. I probably have to do that. No, I don't. Anyway, I am not sure what's there. I will find that out and let you guys know what was going on. Let's try a different one. Cancel. Exit without saving. Yeah. You know, it maybe didn't like that I hadn't set up a data. Oh, you know what? It didn't like that it hadn't set up a data source. So let's actually, maybe with HTML it should have been okay. Let's give one more go. Grab that one. Okay, this is, I'm sure this is me, and it probably has to do with data source not being set up or something, but I will figure that out for next time, because it is kind of cool looking at those examples. You can get a feel for them, of course, just by looking at the HTML, but it would be cool to see them working. All right, let's see what else we've got for questions. Someone pointed out that I misspelled CSS, which is why it wasn't working. Thank you. And the N in SSN. Okay, yeah, that was that's why it didn't work. Thanks very much. That looks like it. Wonderful. If you have further questions, of course, send them to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. And I hope that you found today's session to be helpful and that you consider using client-side templating in your own projects. Look forward to seeing you at our next webinar next Wednesday. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.